Welcome back to the deep dive. Now, today we're doing something, well, a little different.
Bit more structured, maybe?
Exactly. Usually we take a topic and sort of, chase it down a dozen different rabbit holes. But today we are on a mission.
We are. This isn't just a history lesson. I think if you're listening to this, you're probably prepping for the civil services, or you're someone who just genuinely wants to understand the absolute spine of Indian history.
The spine. I like that. We're looking at thousands of years of history.
We are. From the very first stone tool all the way up to the beginnings of feudalism in the Gupta period.
And the goal, really, is to turn this huge, intimidating timeline into a single logical story.
A narrative stream.
Yes. We want to get away from just memorizing dates for the sake of it and really get into the cause and effect.
That is the whole point.
We want to see how something as simple as a better axe or a new metal literally changes the political map of the subcontinent.
It's the key. History isn't just one king dies, another one comes along.
Yeah.
It's about these massive transitions. How do you go from being a nomad chasing animals to building some of the world's first planned cities?
And how does the discovery of iron completely rewrite the rules of power?
Exactly. So today we're focusing strictly on high-yield stuff. We're looking at administration polity, we're looking at culture, art and religion.
And the economic shifts that drove everything else.
The engine of change.
Right. And just a quick disclaimer before we jump in. Everything we're talking about today, it's pulled directly from a specific set of source texts. We have history modules, textbook chapters, revision notes.
So we're sticking to what's in the documents.
We are. This is all about giving you the most accurate revision tool possible. So if we don't talk about your favorite obscure ruler, it's probably because he wasn't in the dossier.
Fair enough. We've got a lot of ground to cover.
We really do. So let's start at the absolute beginning, the foundation, prehistory, the Stone Age.
The very beginning.
Now, for an aspirant, I have to say, this part can sometimes feel a bit dry.
Rocks and bones, yeah.
But there is a clear progression here, isn't there? It sets the stage for everything that follows.
A very, very clear progression. It's all about the tools. We break the Stone Age into three big phases based on how sophisticated the stone tools were.
Okay, so you have the Paleolithic.
The Old Stone Age, then the Mesolithic, or Middle Stone Age.
And finally, the Neolithic, the New Stone Age.
Exactly.
So let's unpack the Paleolithic first. This is the longest stretch of human history, by far.
It is. We're talking about a vast period where humans were nomadic. They were hunter-gatherers.
Constantly on the move.
Right. And the technology that defines this era is what we call crude stone tools. Things like hand axes, cleavers, choppers.
Big, heavy thing.
Big, heavy, functional, not a lot of refinement. You're using them to smash open bones for marrow, chop wood, that kind of thing.
And where in the map are we finding these things? What are the key sites an aspirant needs to know?
They're found all over. But a couple of sites are absolutely crucial. You have Bhimbetka in Madhya Pradesh.
Okay.
And Atirampakam in Tamil Nadu. But Bhimbetka is really special.
Because of the rock art.
Yes. But here's the important takeaway for anyone studying this. Don't just think of the Bhimbetka paintings as, pretty pictures on a cave wall.
It's more than that.
So much more. The source material is very clear on this. These paintings are documentation. They're a record.
A record of what?
Of their economic activities. You see hunting scenes very clearly. You see communal life, people dancing, performing rituals.
So you get a glimpse into their society.
You get a glimpse into social organization, maybe even their early religious beliefs. It's our first written record, even though there's no writing.
That's a great way to put it, a prehistoric archive. Okay, so we move from these big, clunky hand axes to something new, the Mesolithic period.
Right. This is the transitional phase, starting around 10,000 BCE. And the key word here, the technology that defines it, is microliths.
Microliths. So micro, small, lithic stone, tiny stones.
Exactly. Tiny, sharp stone points. And the key innovation is that you're not just holding them in your hand.
You're attaching them to something else.
You're hafting them. Attaching them to wood or bone to make composite tools. Arrows, spears, sickles.
Which tells you hunting is changing.
It has to be.
So why the change? Why go smaller?
Well, the climate was changing. The sources point out it got warmer and drier.
So the environment is different.
The flora and fauna changed. The big ice age megafauna started disappearing. You're now hunting smaller, faster animals.
And you can't hunt a deer with a giant hand axe.
You need speed, you need precision. And arrowhead. So the technology adapted to the environment. We see this at sites like Begor in Rajasthan.
And Adamgar in MP.
Right. And this period also gives us the very first tentative evidence of animal domestication.
But it's the next phase that's the real game changer. The Neolithic, the sources actually call it a revolution.
The Neolithic Revolution. And it is a revolution. This is the moment, starting around 8000 BCE in our context, where humans stop just taking food from nature.
And start making it.
They start producing it. This is the birth of agriculture.
And once you start farming, you have to stay put. You can't just wander off and leave your crops.
Exactly. So what do you get?
The first settled villages.
The first settled villages. And the tools change again. Now you have polished stone tools, axes and adzes that are ground smooth, making them much sharper and more durable for clearing land.
And there are a few key sites here that always come up in exams.
Oh, yeah. Mehrgarh in modern-day Pakistan is one of the earliest agricultural settlements in the world. It's huge.
And within India.
Burzahum in Kashmir is a big one.
That's the one with the dwelling pits, right? They lived underground.
Yes, pits dug into the ground, most likely for protection against the cold climate. And another really high-yield site is Chirand in Bihar.
Why is Chirand so important?
Because of the sheer volume of bone tools they found there, not just stone. It shows a different kind of tool-making tradition.
So, okay, we have settled life. We have agriculture. We have better tools. The foundation is now set for the next big leap.
The first urbanization.
The Harappan civilization.
Or, as it's also known, the Indus Valley civilization.
Right, and the text actually makes a specific point about the name. Why do we tend to call it Harapan?
It's an archaeological convention, really. Harappa was the very first site to be excavated, back in the 1920s.
So we named the whole thing after the first discovery.
We do.
Yeah.
Even though we now know the civilization covered a massive area, way beyond just the Indus River Valley.
Now, for anyone listening for revision, urban planning is probably the #1 high-yield topic here. You just can't talk about Harappa without talking about the grid system.
It's the absolute defining feature. It's what makes it so unique. I mean, you look at other ancient cities, say in Mesopotamia, and they just sort of grow organically.
Yeah.
Streets are narrow, winding.
Bit of a mess.
Bit of a mess. Harappan cities were planned, laid out on a grid, streets intersecting at perfect right angles. There was a clear hierarchy to the whole layout.
Which brings us to the citadel and the lower town.
Precisely. In most of the major cities, Mohenjo-daro, Harappa, Kalibangan, you see this division. To the west, you have the citadel.
Built on a higher mound of earth.
Right. And this is where you find the big, important public structures. The Great Bath of Mohenjo-daro, the granaries, assembly halls.
Suggesting this was the center of power.
An administrative or a ritual center, likely where the ruling class, whoever they were, lived and worked.
And then to the east, you have the lower town.
The lower town. Much larger, on lower ground. This was the residential area. This is where most people lived.
And the thing that it always gets me every time I read about it is the sanitation.
It's mind-blowing. It was so far ahead of its time. We're talking about covered drains running along the main streets.
Covered drains.
And these were connected to smaller drains coming from the houses. They even had manholes for cleaning and inspection.
That implies a very powerful central authority.
It has to. You don't get that kind of civic planning by committee.
Yeah.
And it's not just the drains. Look at the bricks.
They're standardized.
Standardized in size and ratio. Everywhere. Across 1 million square kilometers, the bricks are the same. That just screams central authority.
You don't get that by accident. But let's talk about the engine that's driving all this. Cities don't just pop up out of nowhere. They need to eat.
They need a surplus.
Yeah.
That's the magic word for any urbanization.
Right.
You cannot have a society with priests and rulers and bead makers unless you have farmers who are producing way more food than they need for themselves.
And what were they growing?
Wheat, barley, pulses, various oil seeds, a pretty diverse agricultural base.
And they didn't just eat the surplus, they traded it.
Oh, extensively.
Yeah.
There was internal trade between the cities, but also external long-distance trade.
With Mesopotamia?
Yes. Modern-day Iraq. We found Harappan seals there, and Mesopotamian texts talk about trading with a land called Meluha, which most scholars think was the Harappan region.
And the main port for all this trade was Lothal.
In Gujarat.
The famous dockyard.
Yes. An incredible feat of engineering. A huge artificial brick basin connected to the river. It shows their mastery of maritime technology. They were exporting cotton, beads, ivory, shell ornaments.
Speaking of crafts, we have to mention the art. The source texts always highlight a couple of specific artifacts.
The bronze dancing girl from Mohenjo-Daro is probably the most famous.
It's incredible.
It is. It shows they had mastered the lost wax casting technique for bronze, but it also shows an amazing artistic sensibility.
And then you have the seals.
Thousands of them, made of steatite. The Pashupati seal, the unicorn seal, these weren't just art for art's sake. They were probably used for commerce, to stamp goods, to show ownership.
But then just disappears. The whole urban system collapses.
The decline is one of the great mysteries of history. There are lots of theories. Climate change, floods, invasion. But for our narrative, the key point is that the urban phase ends.
The cities are abandoned.
People move into smaller rural settlements. The script is lost and never used again. The standardized weights and measures vanish. It's a complete systemic collapse.
And that collapse opens the door for the next great chapter in our story.
The Vedic Age.
The Great Transition. And we usually split this era into two distinct parts, right?
We have to. The early Vedic and the later Vedic. And the difference between them is, well, it's night and day.
A massive change.
It is a profound shift. And the source of that entire shift, the catalyst, is one single technological discovery.
But before we get to that, let's set the scene with the early Vedic period, roughly 1500 to 1000 BCE.
Right. So the people we're talking about are often called the Aryans. The texts describe them as living in the Sapta Sindhu region.
The land of the seven rivers. So the Punjab region, basically.
Roughly, yes. And their lifestyle is the crucial thing to understand here. They were pastoralists.
So herders, not farmers.
Not primarily, no. Their economy, their society, their religion, it all revolved around cattle. Wealth was counted in cows. They were semi-nomadic, moving with their herds.
And that has huge implications for their political structure.
Completely. If you're always on the move, you don't have a state with fixed borders. You have a tribe. The term used is jana.
And the king, the Rajan.
He's not an absolute monarch. He's a tribal chieftain. His main job is to lead the tribe in battle, mostly to protect or seize cattle. His power is checked by these tribal assemblies.
The Saba and the Samiti.
Exactly. He has to listen to them. He can't just do whatever he wants.
And what about taxes?
No formal taxation system.
Why not?
Because there's no real agricultural surplus to tax. It's a subsistence economy. The people would give the chief a voluntary offering, called Bali, but it wasn't a mandatory tax.
So it's a simpler, more egalitarian society, and the religion reflects that.
It does. Nature worship. Personified forces of nature, Indra, the god of war and thunder, Agni, the god of fire, Varuna, the god of water. It's very direct.
But then, around 1000 BCE, the dominoes start to fall.
Everything changes.
We enter the later Vedic period. And here comes the hero, or maybe the villain of our story.
Iron.
Iron. The sources call it Ayas or Krishna Ayas.
The black metal.
So, okay, let's really unpack this. Why is iron such a monumental deal? They had bronze and copper before.
They did, but copper and bronze are relatively soft metals.
Yeah.
You can't make a good, strong axe out of bronze. It'll bend or break if you try to chop down a dense hardwood forest.
And that's what was covering the Gangetic Plain.
Exactly. The thick, monsoonal forests of modern Uttar Pradesh and Bihar. But with an iron axe, you can clear those forests, and once you clear them, you find this incredibly fertile alluvial soil.
But it's heavy soil.
Very heavy. You need more than a wooden stick to plow it. You need an iron plowshare to really dig deep and turn that soil over.
So iron axes clear the land, iron plows work the land. And in that fertile soil, this leads to
a massive agricultural surplus. For the first time, rice, called vrihi in the texts, becomes a staple, along with wheat and sugarcane.
And that surplus changes everything.
It triggers a chain reaction, a complete societal transformation.
Okay, let's trace it. First, the economic shift.
Agriculture completely replaces pastoralism as the main economic activity. Land becomes the new source of wealth, not cattle.
Second, the political shift.
The tribe, the jana, now settles down on a specific piece of land. And the jana becomes a janapada.
A territory, a foothold.
Exactly. The concept of rashtra, a territorial state, is born, and the king's power explodes.
Because now he has a surplus to tax and a territory to rule.
Right. And those assemblies, the Sabha and the Samiti, they lose their power. The king becomes much more of an absolute ruler.
And the rituals become more elaborate to prove his power.
Much more. This is when you get the grand, expensive royal sacrifices. The Ashvamedha, the horse sacrifice, the Rajasuya, the Vajrapeya. These are all designed to legitimize the king's absolute control over the land.
And what about the social shift?
This is huge. To manage this more complex, settled agricultural society, the social hierarchy gets much more rigid. The Varna system hardens.
The Brahmins gain more power?
They do. because they control the complex Sanskrit rituals and mantras that the king needs to legitimize his rule. And the sources also note that the position of women starts to decline during this period.
So iron creates the surplus creates the state, and the state creates the social hierarchy.
That is the chain of events perfectly. And this new reality of settled states competing fiercely for land and resources leads us directly into the next great era, around 600 BCE.
The age of the Mahajanapadas.
The 16 great states.
16 of them. But what's really fascinating, and the text points this out, is that they weren't all of the same type of state.
No, not at all. You have two very different political systems operating at the same time.
On one hand, you have the monarchies, the rajas.
Right. Places like Magadha, Kosala, Avanti, ruled by a hereditary king, centralized power, the standard model we think of.
But then you have something else, the Ganasangas.
The republics, or maybe better to call them oligarchies.
Like the Vajji Confederacy or the Lichavis.
Exactly. And the source material highlights that in these states, power wasn't held by one king. It was held by a collective assembly of chieftains, or the heads of important families.
And they made decisions by voting.
They did. In assembly halls called Sandhagara. The text makes a point of connecting this to the deep-rooted democratic traditions in ancient India. It's a very important nuance to remember.
But ultimately, in the contest between these two systems, the monarchies won out.
They did.
And one monarchy in particular, it swallowed up almost everyone else.
Magadha.
The rise of Magadha. This is a classic question. Why them? Why did Magadha triumph over all the others?
It's the perfect case study. It wasn't luck, it was a combination of strategic advantages.
Let's tick them off. First, geography.
The location was perfect. The first capital, Rajgir, was surrounded by 5 hills, a natural fortress.
And the later capital, Pataliputra.
At the confluence of major rivers like the Ganga. This made it a hub for trade, communication, and moving your army. A Jaladurga, or water fort.
Okay, second advantage. Resources.
2 crucial resources. First, iron. The best iron ore mines were right there in South Bihar, what is now Jharkhand. So Magadha had superior weapons and tools.
And the second resource?
Forests, which gave them timber for buildings and boats, and more importantly, elephants.
Elephants were the tanks of the ancient world.
They really were. A game changer on the battlefield. And finally, you have the agricultural base. The fertile Gangetic soil meant a huge surplus, which should feed a large professional standing army.
You put all that together with a series of ambitious and ruthless rulers.
Like Bimbisara and his son Ajatashatru.
Bimbisara was the diplomat, using matrimonial alliances to secure his borders.
Right, he married princesses from Kosala and the Lichavi clan, smart politics. That freed him up to focus on conquering his eastern neighbor, Anga.
And Ajatashatru was the aggressor.
The aggressor. He fought long wars to defeat Kosala and the Vajji Confederacy, using new military inventions to break their power.
And all this consolidation of power in Magadha, it paves the way for the really big one, the first true pan-Indian empire.
The Mauryan Empire.
Founded around 321 BCE by Chandragupta Maurya.
Right. He steps into this power vacuum left in the northwest after Alexander the Great's invasion and retreat.
And he overthrows the Nanda dynasty, the last rulers of Magadha.
And establishes his own empire. The scale of it was unprecedented.
And politically, the Mauryan Empire represents the peak of centralization in ancient India.
That's the traditional view, yeah. Based on sources like Kautilya's Arthashastra, which describes this incredibly detailed, top-down, all-controlling state.
But the sources we're looking at suggest a more nuanced picture.
A little more. The reality was probably that the core of the empire, the area around Magadha, was very tightly and directly administered. But as you moved out to the provinces, to the periphery, the control was likely much looser.
Okay, but let's get into the administrative terms, because these are absolute gold for exams. At the top, you have the king.
The final authority in all matters. He was advised by a council of ministers, the Mantri Parishad.
But the real machinery of the state was the bureaucracy.
A massive, salaried bureaucracy. The high-ranking officials were called amatyas, or mahamantras. And below them, you had the heads of various departments.
The Ethiakshas.
Yes, the superintendents. The texts list something like 27 of them. An incredible level of specialization.
And there are a couple you absolutely have to know. The Sitatyaksha.
The superintendent of agriculture. And this is key. He wasn't just collecting tax from private farms. He was managing the Sita, the crown lands, the state's own farms.
The state was directly involved in production.
Massively. which you see again with the
Was
Mahajanapada.
superintendent of iron.
Exactly. The state had a monopoly on the most strategic resource of the time. They also had a very elaborate espionage system to keep tabs on everyone.
And to pay for all this, the taxation must have been heavy.
It was. The mainland tax was the baga, which was typically 1/6 of the produce. And there were other taxes like the bali and taxes on irrigation.
Now, you can't talk about the Mauryans without talking about Ashoka.
Of course not.
But let's look at a cultural angle that the source material really emphasizes.
Okay.
The Persian influence on Mauryan art and administration.
Yes. This is such a fascinating point. People often think of ancient India as isolated, but it wasn't.
So what's the connection? Persian, as in the Achaemenid Empire in Iran?
Exactly. Look at Ashoka's rock edicts. The very idea of carving royal proclamations on stone for the public to see, that's a Persian idea. The preamble to the edicts, the style of it, is very similar to the inscriptions of Persian kings like Darius.
And what about art? The famous Mauryan pillars.
The bell-shaped capital at the top of the pillars. That's a direct influence from the pillars at Persepolis, the Persian capital. Even the Kharosthi script used in the northwestern part of Ashoka's empire is derived from Aramaic, which was the administrative language of the Persian Empire.
So there was a lot of cultural borrowing going on.
A lot. And then, of course, you have Ashoka's policy of Dhamma.
Right. And it's important to be clear about what Dhamma was.
It's crucial. Dhamma was not a religion. Ashoka was personally a Buddhist, but Dhamma wasn't Buddhism.
It was a code of conduct.
A code of social and ethical conduct. Respect your elders, be kind to servants, don't kill animals unnecessarily, religious tolerance. It was in many ways a political ideology designed to hold his vast, diverse empire together peacefully.
But even great empires fall. The Mauryan Empire collapses around 185 BCE.
And we enter what's called the Post-Mauryan period.
Which some older historians used to call a dark age.
A complete misnomer. It's the opposite of a dark age. It's a period of political fragmentation, yes, but also incredible economic prosperity and cultural fusion.
Because you have all these new groups coming into India from the northwest.
Right, the power vacuum left by the Mauryans pulls them in. First, the Indo-Greeks.
The successors to Alexander the Great's generals.
Exactly. And their main contribution, for exam purposes, is numismatics, coins.
They were the first to issue coins with portraits of the kings.
The very first. Before this, Indian coins were punch-marked with symbols. The Indo-Greeks give us beautiful coins with realistic portraits, names, and titles. It's a historian's dream.
And we also get that famous text, the Milindapano.
The Questions of Milinda. It's a philosophical dialogue between the Indo-Greek king Menander, or Milinda, and a Buddhist monk named Nagasena. It's a perfect example of this cultural fusion.
After the Greeks come the Shakhas, and after them, the most important group,
The Kushanas,
who are from Central Asia.
a tribe called the Yuchi. Their greatest ruler was Kanishka. And for Kanishka, there are 3 things you really need to remember.
Okay, what are they?
First, his title. He called himself Devaputra,
Son of God.
which is a huge step up from the Mauryan title, Beloved of the Gods. The king is now claiming divinity, not just divine favor.
Second point.
His administration. He used a system of military governors called Kshatrapas, or Mahakshatrapas. It's a system they brought with them from Central Asia.
And the third and most important point.
Culture. The Kushan period under Kanishka was a cultural zenith. He patronized the 4th Buddhist council in Kashmir.
And this is where Buddhism officially splits.
Into the Hinayana and Mahayana schools, a major turning point. And in art, you have the flowering of the Gandhara and Mathura schools.
Gandhara is the one that looks Greek.
It is. It's also called Greco-Buddhist art. The Buddhas look like the Greek god Apollo, with wavy hair, muscular bodies, and toga-like robes.
And how is that different from the Mathura school?
The Mathura school was purely indigenous. The style is different. The Buddhas are less muscular, the drapery is lighter, and there's a greater emphasis on conveying a sense of inner spiritual energy.
And economically, this was a golden age for trade.
An absolute boon time. The Kushanas controlled a key section of the Silk Road. They were the middlemen connecting the Roman Empire in the west with Han China in the east. And vast amounts of Roman gold flowed into India as a result.
Which brings us to the final major act in our ancient timeline.
The Gupta Empire, the so-called Classical Age.
But the key here politically is the structural shift. It's all about contrasting them with the Mauryans.
You have to. It's the only way to understand what's new. So think of the Mauryan state as a pyramid.
Centralized. Power flows from the top down.
Exactly. The Gupta state was more like a circle of circles, a mandala. It was decentralized.
They relied on feudatories, the Samantas.
Yes. They didn't try to directly administer every corner of their empire like the Mauryans did. They defeated local kings and then allowed them to continue ruling their own lands as long as they paid tribute and acknowledged Gupta overlordship.
So they didn't have that massive salaried bureaucracy.
No. And this leads to probably the single most important economic and political development of the age.
Land grants.
This is the so what of the Gupta period. The king started granting land and the revenue from that land to Brahmins, to temples, and increasingly to their own officials.
As payment instead of a cash salary.
Exactly. The Mauryans paid their officials in cash, in coins called panas. The Guptas started paying them in land.
What is the long-term consequence of that decision?
It's the beginning of Indian feudalism. When you give an official a village instead of a salary, he becomes the de facto lord of that village. He collects the taxes, he administers justice. Power shifts from the central king to these local landed intermediaries.
And what happened to trade?
The sources suggest that long-distance trade, especially with the West, declined compared to the Kushan period. The economy became more rural, more agrarian, more localized. You find far fewer coins from the post-Gupta period.
But culturally, it was a high point.
A true zenith. In literature, you have Kalidasa. In science, Aryabhata. And in religion, this is the period that sees the real consolidation of what we call Puranic Hinduism.
So a shift away from the old Vedic sacrifices.
A big shift towards bhakti and image worship. The worship of deities like Vishnu and Shiva in temples becomes central.
And speaking of temples, this is when we get the first ones built of stone.
The first freestanding structural temples. Before this, religious architecture was mostly rock-cut caves or stupas. But now you get the first true temples, like the Dashavatara temple at Diogar. This is the blueprint for all later Hindu temple architecture.
Okay, so that's the journey. It's a wild ride when you lay it all out.
It really is.
Let's do a super quick flyover of the whole narrative stream just to lock it in.
Let's do it. You start with the Stone Age.
Hunter-gatherers slowly getting better tools, which leads to farming.
That farming surplus creates Harappa.
The first urbanization. Planned cities.
Then a collapse, a reset. The Vedic pastoralists arrive. But then, bam!
Iron.
Iron changes the game. It creates a new surplus in the Gangetic Plains.
That surplus fuels the rise of the Mahajanapadas, the big states.
And the competition between those states leads to the victory of Magadha.
Magadha expands into the Mauryan Empire.
Highly centralized, top-down, cash-based bureaucracy.
That fragments, leading to the Post-Mauryan era.
Not a dark age. An age of fusion, trade, and amazing art.
And finally, the Guptas build a new kind of empire.
Decentralized, based on feudatories and land grants, which lays the foundation for medieval India.
That is thousands of years in what feels like a single breath.
It's the spine. If you understand that flow, that cause and effect, you can tackle almost any analytical question they throw at you.
Before we sign off, we always like to leave our listeners with a final provocative thought.
Right. So I want you to really think about that one fundamental shift we talked about, the shift from cash to land.
The Mauryans paying in coin versus the Guptas paying in land grants.
Yes. And the question is this: how did that one single economic decision to pay your bureaucrats in dirt rather than in silver, how did that fundamentally alter the political geography and destiny of India for the next 1,000 years?
It shattered that central authority.
It created thousands of little centers of power, thousands of local lords, making it almost impossible for another single centralized empire like the Mauryan one to hold the entire subcontinent together for a very, very long time.
Something to chew on. And for everyone listening, go back and review those specific terms. Siddhadaksha, Devaputra, Agrahara.
Those are your prelims questions right there.
Understanding the why really helps you remember the what.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Thanks for diving deep with us today. We'll see you on the next one.
Keep learning.